Thank you for listening to the Nerd Best Friends podcast. Although, if you stop listening, they stop recording them. And maybe some laundry would get done around here. ¿Por qué no te pones a hacer algo? Ponte a lavar, ponte a limpiar, baja esa brocha. Todo está con tu nerd y tu Nerd Best Friends. ¿Cómo es eso?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you for listening to the Nerd Best Friends podcast. I'm Annalise, and I'm here with my best friend, Rob.
Hey, it's Rob, your best friend, your podcast host, and your English watcher / father figure. This week, we are tackling the television series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Get ready. Buckle up. I think this podcast may have been created so that Annalise could do this episode.
Spoiler alert. Okay, Rob, before we get to the episode, how about the craft beer of this episode?
The craft beer of this episode is a beer that I have been thinking about as the time has changed. The weather has changed a little bit. The mornings are a little cloudy. There's that fall crisp or winter crisp in the air. I have been thinking about a beer called Beer for Breakfast. It is a stout that was made by Dogfish Head Brewing. I have not had it in years. I believe Dogfish Head is a San Diego brewery.
Okay.
They've got great beer there. You have very strong beers normally. And I think what I remember most about Beer for Breakfast was this stout, a coffee stout that was, a nice morning beer if you're going to do some morning drinking. But it still had that hoppy bitterness kind of in the background that was distinctly Dogfish Head. And I haven't had it in years. I've looked for it a few times. I'm not sure if they make it anymore. But if anybody has a line on Beer for Breakfast by Dogfish Head, it's got a picture of a pig eating pancakes. I'm not sure if he's eating bacon or if that's just the implication, but I miss that beer. I've been thinking about it. That's my craft beer of the episode.
We're going to have to find it now. Here's a question I have for you on that. Did you have it in San Diego one time in your trips down there for conferences or whatnot? Or did you find it in a store one day and try it?
It was here in a store locally. My brother-in-law actually introduced me to it. He had it at his house. If I remember correctly, it comes in like a 4-pack of bottles, and he had it. And I was like, oh, this is really great. And then I also had found it locally, and it was in the fridge, and just, oh yeah, no problem. It's Sunday morning. I want to have this beer for breakfast and pair it with my pancakes or whatever, not realizing that I would never see it again.
Oh man. All right. The hunt is on for Beer for Breakfast. Now, how about some nerd mail or mail from some of our listeners? Rob, do you have anything for us?
You let me know that there was something that came in, questions on where to get that TMNT, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game that I've been talking about. Literally still Ninja Turtles are on my painting table right now because I'm still going through all these minis. Yes, I got in on that on the Kickstarter. And what the base game is, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Change is Constant. Change is Constant is the name of the first volume of the IDW comic series that this game is based on. So all the storylines, the character portrayals and powers and stuff that you get in the game are based on the IDW comic book series. So volume 1 of that series was called Change is Constant. That's the game you want to get if you are looking into this, because it's the game that has all 4 playable turtles and a bunch of ninjas and stuff for you to fight. That's the base game. After that, there is a second box that goes along with, I think, the second volume or maybe a later volume called City Fall. This one people like is really cool because this is the one where Leonardo gets brainwashed and turns bad. He's got like shredder claws and stuff. While it is also cool and it's a great addition to the game, even though it's standalone, but it comes after, you're not going to get your favorite turtles as the playable characters, right? I think the playable characters are like April O'Neil and Casey Jones and Splinter. And then you've got all the expansions that came with the Kickstarter. So for base game wise, Change is Constant. You can find that on Amazon. It's $80 on Amazon. You can also find it on Miniature Market. MiniatureMarket.com is a great site. I think I bought 12 sets of dice as low as $2 a set. Like I just started adding, like if they were $4, $3, or $2, I just put them in the cart, And there were so many in there. I was like, okay, well, clearly I can't buy all these dice. I was like, what if I just bought the ones that were only $2? And they just showed up the other day.
Oh,
I'm
man.
like, yes.
I know. I'm trying to avoid becoming the dice nerd, but man, some of the ones you've sent look really cool.
Yeah, it was a big week for dice because I also got another dice Kickstarter. It's a whole other, we're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle board game.
Back to the game.
So you can grab it for $80 on Amazon. It is $100 on Miniature Market. But why I bring up Miniature Market is because they also have the second game, which is also $100. And what is cool is they also have the Kickstarter bundle. So all the expansions that you would have gotten in the Kickstarter, it's called the All the Loot bundle on Miniature Market, and that'll run you $350. I would recommend go to Amazon, $80, get that City Fall game. It's solid. You'll get all your turtles in there. There's plenty of miniatures, really fun. But if you missed that Kickstarter and you want to get everything, that's going to set you back $550 at this point.
Well, there you go. There's a place to buy it. And I know at least that base game, you've posted a lot on your Instagram games that you've played with your family on that. It just seems to be the gift that keeps on giving.
It's a fun little game. We went through the entire book of adventures in the Changes Constant box, and then we moved into some of the expansion boxes. We're going in comic order, right? Because my son and I read the comics, so we're just playing them in that order. So the next one was Shadows of the Past. We went through all of the ones in that box, and then we're getting ready to start the City Fall box, which I actually just finished painting a couple weeks ago. So that's ready to go.
Nice. Other listener mail, we had someone write in about the Overwatch trope we talked about with the Batman episode, last episode. And we had brought up James Bond and the question about the character M and how M relates to James Bond. Was M really an Overwatch without being labeled so? A listener wrote in and said, actually, you're looking for the character Q in James Bond. So Q stands for Quartermaster. And Q is the person that was the gadgets guy. But in the newer Bond movies, Q communicates with James Bond throughout the adventure. I think to one particular moment in the Daniel Craig James Bond movies that came out in the last decade, there's a moment where he's been poisoned and his heart is stopping and they have a mini AED machine and he's communicating with Q over it and to try to save his life. So there is a little bit of that trope that eked into away from just the gadgets and gears guy into he's there with his computer and he's a younger guy and he does all this tech gadget things, but he also is in constant communication with Bond while Bond is out doing things to the extent that it becomes a joke. Sometimes he throws out the thing and says I work alone. So that was a great little catch by a listener.
You know, I also caught something. I think I called that character, the Barbara Gordon character, Overwatch in that episode mistakenly. The character name in the comics is Oracle, and she is the Overwatch trope.
Right.
I think I remember that I misspoke in my excitement to talk about Batman.
Yeah, good stuff. And really great. This having the conversations with people now writing in and telling us, hey, this thing. So that was really good.
Because we could just sit and have these conversations ourselves. It's the listener feedback and the engagement that we're looking for. So thank you for writing in. You too can write in and send us a message, nerdbestfriends@gmail.com, or on our Instagram, send a message.
Yes, please do. Let's get to Buffy. So before we start this episode, Rob, I want to start with a disclaimer. We know now that Joss Whedon is problematic. So let's just throw that out there. Not hide behind it, not let it be an elephant in the room. He's done some things that's coming out now. We support Charisma Carpenter and the things she's come forward with. We support all of the actors in all of the movies who have come forward with some of the problematic things Joss Whedon has now been either accused of or made known about. But also, he made a lot of great work in the 90s and early 2000s that really shapes a lot of Nerdverse. Really shapes a lot of things that it's hard to ignore. Buffy, for me, is a huge part of my life. He's also made Firefly, Dr. Horrible, such a great 45-minute mini film, Dollhouse, the Avenger movies. Dr. Horrible itself is so impactful. Lin-Manuel Miranda has tweeted about how much he loves Dr. Horrible. So there's just a lot of great things and a lot of great art that came out of Joss Whedon.
So this is something that comes up a lot in your nerd hobby and nerd interests, especially since a lot of times we go back to the foundations of things that we love. Like one of the things that I'm very influenced by in the games that I play and the things that I do is, high fantasy and those high fantasy tropes. When we look at people like Robert E. Howard, and when we look at people like Lovecraft and those kinds of things, like not only did they live at a different time, but sometimes that's not even an excuse for the bad things that they had done and the way that they acted and the different attitudes and things that they had. Separating the art from the artist is a common conversation had around, nerd circles like this. It is something to kind of struggle with, and it's something that we need to think about. The idea that it is possible for someone to create great works, to have influence over an entire genre, to fundamentally change the way things are done, and maybe also be a horrible person is troubling sometimes. So we will separate those things. And that is something that we will have to go through, I imagine, a lot as we go through the show, since it's public facing, to say, we're going to talk a lot about some really great things Joss Whedon did with his writing and some of the brilliance that he's done, like you said, not only in this show, but I mean, the Avengers. I don't know that another writer could have pulled that off the way he did with such a huge ensemble because of having the experience of some of the ensemble pieces that he had done in the past. I still would recommend his astonishing X-Men comic run. It's good and did a lot to tie in something that is the X-Men, which are continuity problematic since forever. That's the strength of his writing.
Well, I mean,
he's not great.
Certainly not to celebrate the man that we have now learned it has done some things that aren't good, just to label it simply, but to celebrate some of those gifts to the genres. I could argue and say that I think MCU doesn't exist without Joss Whedon doing that Avengers movie, because he walked into that already understanding this big arc. Television shows did not really have big villain arcs in which every episode lends itself towards that end piece until Buffy came out. There was a little bit of it and there were hints of it, but he really mastered it. So you were right. By the time he got to doing that first Avengers movie, he took some of these singular superhero movies that did well and created this thing that then kind of launched the large arc that became what we now know as all these movies and pieces.
At that time, it hinged on that movie. If Avengers had sucked, everything would have fallen apart because there were so many eyes upon it. Like whatever had been 8-12 movies had come out before this big tied together movie. And all the film critics and all the nerds and all the fans were just, how are they going to do it? How are they going to get all these personalities into the same thing? How are they going to share the spotlight? How are they going to make this happen? And I think pulled it off amazingly.
And the second piece to this that I keep coming back to, again, not celebrating the man, because despite what we now know of his treatment of women on film sets and on the TV show sets, I remember very, very specifically second year or third year of Buffy, there's an interview of Joss Whedon in which the interviewer says, how long or how many times do you think something about a strong female lead? And his answer basically was, until you don't have to ask that question, until it's no longer an anomaly that a strong, smart, badass female lead can carry a show. So he understood that despite his misogyny and all these other things that we're learning about that were the culture on his sets. He understood that impact. And that's part of what makes Buffy so special.
Definitely the writing talent is apparent as we will go through. Like when we talk about most of the things we're going to talk about today of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we're going to be talking about the writing, the thing that he brought, and I think the strength that he had was to lean on the characters and have the characters be who they are. And there's a mistake I think some writers make where they need something to happen in the story, so they will modify the characters' motivations and the way the characters are to get to those plot points. I think the strength in the writing of this show and in Avengers is no. Lean on the character and who this is. Start there. How would Captain America perceive Iron Man? How would Hawkeye look at this situation based on who their character is? Not where my story needs to be. Do I then put characters into my ensemble piece? But start there and let the characters take it. And
everything has a purpose, and the purpose is known way at the front and it's never a gray area, the purpose of each of these characters, and so meticulous that actually, I don't know if you knew this, Allison Hannigan wasn't the original Willow.
I didn't
There
know.
is a pilot that is on the interwebs somewhere. You can find it, and there's a different actress casted as Willow who just, bless her heart, just wasn't quite the gel they wanted. Allison Hannigan comes in and brings some depth to the character that allows Joss Whedon to have the trope. And he mentions this way back in the days of DVDs you could watch with the director's notes. And I did that because I love the show so much. And one of them, he said he realized episode 2 put Willow in danger. So you have to care about Willow enough that you don't want something to happen to her. And you can think in your head how many times that trope comes across from season 1 to season 7. Put Willow in danger. And no, we don't want anything to happen to Willow. It's so meticulous and so well thought out that every single character you care about right away, and every single character has a purpose that's well known from the onset, carries through for every episode of
that's Superman writing. What is dangerous, or what does Buffy care about? How do we make Buffy struggle through something? Well, clearly she can dust any vampire that's out there. We've shown time and time and time again that she can kick butt and take names no matter what it is. So she's almost invincible against vampires at this point. But if we drop Lois Lane off a building, then Superman has to make a choice. If we kidnap Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal, then it's something to care about, because we can't hurt him. We have to build the friend group. We have to build that family around it. And that's who we put in danger. That's who we threaten for our superhero.
And not only that, but diving into that first season, we have these first 2 episodes, Welcome to the Hellmouth Part 1 and 2, and you're watching it. And I remember I watched this from premiere date live when it was in 1997 when it started. And I remember watching those first 2 episodes because I had seen the movie in the theaters when we were in high school. And now I'm in college, and Lois and Clark was ending and I needed a show. And this was a mid-season pickup. I watched it, loved it. But I thought, how can we watch an entire series about this one girl who's just going to kill vampires all over the place? Then you get to episode 3, which is titled The Witch. And they flip the script and talk about the Hellmouth, and they talk about how there's all these different types of evil. And as the chosen one, she's not just there to slay vampires, she's there to fight against all evil. And her being drawn to the Hellmouth wasn't an accident. And that hooked me. That 3rd episode, The Witch, I was done and into the show. So it's even more than those Superman tropes. It's even more than the tropes that Joss Whedon hung his hat on throughout the series. It's also how much of the horror genre can we throw in? Buffy versus Dracula, a Frankenstein type movie, a Jekyll and Hyde type, episode, Jekyll and Hyde type episodes that happen throughout. You have an evil character like Ethan Rayne who jumps in and out and doesn't ever affect the whole storyline, but helps with depth of what Buffy is dealing with. And that's the part of the beauty of the show.
So the way we put this together, of course, a top 5 structure. It's a podcast. It's the internet. It's top 5 everything. So we're going to talk about top 5 episodes, top 5 jokes, and top 5 villains. Do we want to go in that order, or where do you feel like we should start?
I think we can start with villains. I think that's a good place to start, or the inside joke. Well, the inside jokes probably should be last. So I think we should start with villains. Let me also stop and pause us for a moment and say to our listeners, if you have not watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this is all spoilers.
Spoilers.
Exactly. So don't listen until after you've watched it, or listen and know what you're facing.
And if you are interested in checking this out, we had mentioned an episode or 2 ago about the different watch lists that I was able to put together. Yeah. There was an article that I had found where a person had put together playlists built on the different kind of themes of the show. So there was like one of the playlists was called The Slayer's Journey. There was another playlist called High School that focused on, their time at high school and those episodes. There's another one called Buffy and Angel that goes through all 7 seasons, just focusing on the ones with that relationship. There's another one called Spike. There's another one called Willow, and put these together. I ended up watching, the way I went through for this second watching to prepare for this episode was I took all the episodes from the Slayer's Journey playlist and all the episodes from the Apocalypse playlist. And then I went through and looked at all of the other ones to see if there were any episodes that like repeated 3 or more times that weren't already on my list, and put that together. So I think we'll be able to link the document that I created into like the show notes where you click on your phone and it shows not just the album picture, but the description. And I think we can put a live link in there. But I ended up watching 56 episodes in preparation for this episode. You owe me, Annalise. That is like 50 hours of my life in the last couple of weeks that I will not get back. I'm going to take that payment from you. We are going to have to do the Firefly episode, which was another Joss Whedon thing. You're going to have to watch all 12 episodes and the movie, and it'll still only be half the time I spent on Buffy for your episode.
Fair to say that I caught up on MCU, my friend. I think.
No, you didn't. You were just telling me before the show that you're still like 6 things behind.
I meant before the first 23 movies, but
you're talking before.
Yes,
but BP before podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, I actually have never seen any of Firefly, so I've always wanted to. I will add that to my list, and I will still owe you. Maybe I can paint some minis for you or something.
I'm gonna make you. I'm making you watch it. It's so good.
It's worth it. Love it. But also, I'm gonna say this is gonna pay dividends, because I will say there is more that we can talk about this, and we definitely have some listeners that perked their ears up about upcoming Buffy episodes. So we'll keep that in mind. But let's start with top 5 villains. Rob, who did you put for your 5?
Okay, so my number 5, I put Faith, played by, remind me the name of the
Elijah
actress.
Dushku.
Elijah. I wanted to say Erica, but I knew it was wrong. Elijah Dushku is the actress who plays Faith. She is very different than Buffy. She has a much more cavalier attitude about fighting and slaying, and she's kind of more of a bad girl, where Buffy's kind of more of like the Valley Girl type tropes. So they clash, they work together, they betray each other. Faith disappears for a while, but then comes back in later seasons. And I think she's fantastic. I loved Dollhouse, where she was the starring role in that. I think she does a great job. Her take on the Slayer, as it's almost masculine in a tropey way, where it's like there are literal scenes of the show where she's like, I'll whip it out right now, and starts unbuttoning her pants. Like, she's a very like I don't know, just out front, vulgar, in your face. I think she does it perfectly. I always look forward to the Faith episodes. So,
and I put Faith as my number 1 on my list of 5, and there's a few reasons for it. You touched on a lot of them, which with the payoff for Faith's differentness to Buffy is in the episode where they switch bodies, where she does that little charm thing and they switch bodies.
That's right.
And Sarah Michelle Gellar playing Elijah Dushku, playing Faith, who's playing Buffy, is just golden. It really just forefront that exact trope why Faith exists. But what I really appreciated about Faith as a villain to her, we find out that her watcher was killed. And it was right in front of her, and she feels it's her fault. So some of that outwardly bad person or bad acting person that's different than Buffy is based off of the fact that she's got this trauma and this PTSD that she has gone unhinged about. She's absolutely human with the Slayer powers. I remember feeling just angst and anger, and how dare she try to kill Angel, and wanting her dead, and really feeling that was the hardest villain Buffy had to face, because this is someone who is human. This is someone who's in her sisterhood, and it's someone she felt at some point she absolutely had to kill. It just brought back up that end of season 2 where should I do it? Do I have to kill Angel? Except in a human form. Faith up there for me as a villain.
All right, so my number 5, your number 1, knocked out already. So now do we go to your number 5?
I picked the Council as my number 5 villain in the way that they do all that foolery on Buffy's birthday episodes. To the extent that you get to the last birthday episode of hers that they celebrate, and she is quote unquote fired the council, or she quits the council, and Giles is fired from the council. And it really turns Buffy's purpose on its head, because they send Wesley the next season, and she's like, F you, Wesley, I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say. And Giles is still kind of the watcher, even though he's not being paid to be the watcher. Like, it's a whole great series on the council. And eventually the council kind of just goes away, because they realize they figure her as a rogue slayer, but she's getting the job done. And then she dies. They fail at harnessing Faith back in.
Faith,
yeah. So the council as a villain is a pretty phenomenal build for a couple of seasons to that payoff of when they fail with Faith.
As I have just done all of this rewatching, in the last couple of episodes, I don't know if you remember, they definitely make sure to have assassins break in and murder all of the council, so we get it
explodes
tied up.
You get right? that bad early 2000s CGI of the building exploding. Yes. And yeah, I love it, because they also were failing at protecting all the potential slayers. in
And
last
that failure there's symbolism there as far as I see. Like, the council is the bureaucracy, and they are, there's this special organization that's trying to do a very specific job. There's this oversight, and it's very far away, and it has no idea what you're actually doing on the ground. And it comes in with all of this power to start muddling everything up, where if you just let me do my job, we can get the job done. That's adulting, right? That's work. Where
100%.
Buffy is the teenage Slayer. This is like, well, this is what the adult world looks like. These are the CEOs of Slayerdom, and it's only bad and frustrating. It's the bureaucracy.
And they really, really put a spotlight on that after the episode in which she meets the first Slayer. Both she and Giles, that whole dream sequence that set up Dawn coming in. That whole dream episode, and she meets the first Slayer, and Giles and Buffy both get to I'm a teenager, even more than before. And that really starts to lead toward, there's just so much good in having the council as that poorly done Overwatch, to the point that it becomes villainous and dangerous for Buffy.
Oversight.
Ah, there you go.
Number 4, I chose Drusilla. And Drusilla, it's always hard to put in order, but Drusilla is crazy, and she's creepy crazy. She talks to dead birds that she keeps as pets. She'll just go on these sentences that are one side of a conversation she had hundreds of years ago. Just beautifully written, perfectly creepy. She is what you want from that vampire queen. She doesn't have these plans for grandeur. She's not trying to take over the world. She is just creepy and pure evil and beautiful and almost cute to a point, but so evil and so creepy. Just a perfect vampire.
She's my number 2. Her backstory is amazing. The way they had her become insane is amazing. Tap into the ethereal, stone believing, moon watching. I believe in all the things that Rob doesn't believe in. I can sense it in the air. She's got all of those things going on, but she's weak when she's introduced. She's weak, and Spike is trying to cure her. And when she regains her full strength, she is absolutely terrifying. She kills Kendra like it's nothing. See into me, and boom with her nail. She doesn't even bother to feed on the Slayer's blood, which is built up to be this special magical blood for vampires. She kills Kendra like it's nothing and walks out with what she needs, which is at that point is Giles. They pull Giles away to torture him. And she is the most evil thing. She's more evil than the Master. In my opinion, more evil than the First, only in the sense that she's able to do more than the First can. The First really can't touch them. First is not powerful enough to touch them. It only messes with them a little bit. She can actually kill them. Just wonderful. I wish there was more to her after season 2. I know she comes back for a couple of quick little things here and there, but she's the most terrifying villain that Buffy faced.
I think so. That's the crux of it, is she's the scariest because of that unpredictability and that idea of she doesn't have a motive. She's just evil.
She's insane and she's evil.
Yes.
My number 4, I couldn't decide. So I put Evil Willow or Caleb. And the reason is both of them are problematic to me. Caleb is also terrifying, but he's not there long enough to be terrifying enough. Evil Willow is terrifying, but it's Willow and you don't want anything to happen to her. So can you really stomach her as the villain? She is the villain at the end of that season. But that was the one weird turn that they make on Buffy, in that those 3 nerds, the 3 were the villains all season. And then boom, Willow comes in that just got really wonky. So neither of them and both of them are my number 4, because individually they're terrifying. Individually, they're a little too problematic for me to rate them higher.
I think the problem with Evil Willow is that I want more Evil Willow. I'm yes,
so it's
Evil
one way
Willow,
or the other, right?
Right.
Either be all Evil Willow and she pays those consequences, or don't. And they didn't go either direction with it. Right.
So Evil Willow at the end of that season, where she just skins that dude alive, is shocking. And then when the next season starts up again, they turn the magic into an allegory for drug addiction, and she has all of these problems. That's the part of Evil Willow that you don't want. Oh, poor Willow. We want her to get better and not do this. But there's a comic book universe out there somewhere where Willow snaps her fingers and her hair and her eyes turn black and she just starts murdering people on command, that I think I might be here for. I
would watch her read a series about evil Willow or vampire Willow. Easily.
Yep. So Caleb, as you mentioned, Caleb is my number one.
Okay.
My bias is for Nathan Fillion. Nathan Fillion is so good. He's so charming. Just the way his voice is and the way he delivers lines is just perfect for me, which I think you're going to absolutely fall in love with his character in Firefly, and where he's reading all of his lines in iambic pentameter, and it's like the Texas accent. So it's just so good. In this show, we see a little bit of that. Now, I came to the show later, so I had seen Nathan Fillion in things like Firefly and things like Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog first. Hammer. So going back and then watching him as just this horrible, evil, misogynistic murderer, I'm like, oh, look what they made my sweet boy do. Like, I can't believe it that this is the same person, and how evil and scary he is. And what I liked about it so much was because it was built up for that series finale, he's very much the opposite of Buffy. He's very much the opposite of feminism and girl power. As opposite as the writers could make him, he enacts it. And he's scary, and he's powerful, and he's evil, and he's dressed like a priest, which I love the juxtaposition of that. And down there in the winery dungeon, it's fun. And the last however many episodes that is of that arc with the first and with him leading up to the series finale is just bar none my favorite of all of Buffy. Like, I watched 50 hours of Buffy, but I got through to that moment, and it all just made it that much more to watch that again.
I don't disagree with you. He's scary. He's played beautifully. Caleb is no nonsense, righteous. He believes he is doing the right will of God by being against Buffy, but he's also convinced of all that by the first.
Yes, and that's apparent. It's apparent in the way that he plays it and the interactions that he has with the first, who is often played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, which is a really cool thing that they did there. You just see that he was completely corrupted by power.
And they make him seem untouchable, and then he dies too quickly. Right? There's my problem with that. He's the one that blinds Xander. You're the one who sees, and he blinds Xander, like so symbolic. At the end of the entire series, Xander's big thing was, where do I fit in? I'm just this goofy dude who gets the donuts, right? It's Caleb that actually makes him see that he's the seer. And it's Caleb that blinds him from being that thing. So he has this very intense purpose, very intense and scary villain, but he's controlled and manipulated by the first, who I put as my next on my list. So that I put the first there. The first is not touchable. The first evil is untouchable and makes numerous appearances throughout the series. It's one of those things. Joss Whedon knew what he was going to do with the end of Buffy whenever the end of Buffy was to happen. He knew the first was a thing because the first tortures Angel a couple of times in the early seasons. So the first it's untouchable, absolutely evil, absolutely manipulative, and seems to win all of the time. And you can even argue that the first wins at the series finale of Buffy because the apocalypse is about to happen. So Buffy never actually beats the first. The first still exists. The first evil is still there. She just stopped the apocalypse from happening.
By destroying the entire city.
Yes.
Just ridiculous. Again, some great writing. The first is a really cool idea. The idea of the first is the first can appear to you as someone who has died. So just by that very nature of a villain, there's always going to be an emotional tug. When you see someone appear to a character that you know because you've invested your time to watch all these episodes, I know that character's dead. It's now talking to this person who loves that character. This is the first. And then you watch that manipulation start happening. I love the tropes or ideas of that evil as a manipulator, right? That's like a classic, like the devil type thing, right? It's,
right, true.
The devil doesn't come down and beat you up with his claws and his pitchfork. The devil is that voice that only you can hear that is influencing you to do those evil things. And that is what the first is doing. It never touches you. It can't hurt you. It can only manipulate you. An absolute great choice. The first is excellently done.
So what's left on the list is the one we haven't talked about. Your number 3.
My number 3 was The Gentleman. The Gentleman from the episode Hush, which is the episode where the gentlemen float through town and they steal the voices of everyone. absolutely unique as far as an idea to put on television, and a way that they did that was something that was, I found, super creative. They look just super creepy. They are thin and gaunt and tall, and almost like they're hung on coat hangers. Their feet just kind of dangle. They never touch the ground as they float through. They have these huge, just frozen, ugly smiles and wide eyes on their pale, bald faces. They have these minions that run around with them, which are just these like ridiculous, not Scary Farm style guys. They have open straight jackets on, and their heads are all like wrapped in like leather and staples. And they just kind of like monkey around the streets and do the gentleman's will. Amazingly creepy. All the shots in this episode where that like smiling face just floats by the window as someone's looking out there, or they open the door because there's a knock on the door and you open it, there's just the three gentlemen just with their crazy creepy smiles. Like, it's such a good monster of the week villain. Right? It doesn't have to be a long running thing. It doesn't have to have any kind of like big apocalypse style overarching plot. It's just a creepy, awesome episode. And it is, to me, like, that's what you tune into Buffy the Vampire Slayer for, right? You want to see a Monster of the Week show. You want to see something creepy. And this one is like, it's really scary. There are jump scares in this episode, and it'll freak you out.
We'll talk about Hush later for sure, but I will say the gentlemen are superb. And it is the scariest episode of Buffy in all 7 seasons, in my opinion. We'll talk about that more because I think we both have Hush on our top 5 episodes list. So let's transition to that. Let's talk about our top 5 episodes. I'm just going to note that my top 5 are not in any order. I kind of just went by what I remembered as some of my favorite episodes. Are yours?
Well, let's go down since we're talking about it. I see that in the first box is Hush. So You want to keep talking about that since we're on there? Anyway?
Let's do it. So Hush is the only episode in Buffy's series to have been nominated for an Emmy for writing. And it has so many layers of complexities. Rob just described the gentlemen who steal the voices of everyone in town. Their goal is to get 7 hearts. They have little scalpels and they move very slow and very creepily. And that grin, they're grinning at each other while they cut open people who are alive, and they're screaming, but you can't hear them. So,
which, Rob loves stories where you have to go around and collect a number of things. This is Pirates of the Dark Water. It's your quest. You got to go gather all the things to put together the power. It's Pirates of the Dark Water. It's the Rod of 7 Parts. Everything. All right.
But it also follows some of the horror movie genre. Buffy, with her prolific dreams, has the dream with a little girl singing the little rhyme, 1, 2, the gentleman's coming for you, whatever it is, right? So they have that horror movie thing. You have the fact that all their voices are taken away. So it throws some funny things out there. And one of my favorite scenes in this show is them sitting and getting schooled or informed by Giles, and he's got to use overhead slides, and he puts on the little
good. He plays a tape record. Why?
The jokes
he's a
in there.
School librarian.
Yes. Yeah. And that scene is just brilliant because you have to know enough about the characters. Buffy making the staking hand movement, and everyone looking at her and pointing at her hips because Giles has made a stick figure of her that makes her look fat. And Xander,
I think Xander has. Yeah.
He's right. Yeah. There's just all of that. It just all those characters. What you miss in the whole thing, if you're not paying close attention, because the whole episode is brilliant. The ending of the episode gives me chills every time, because this whole season, Buffy is just starting to date Riley, who we know, because Buffy doesn't know this, but we're watching the show, so we know that he's this soldier dude in this secret initiative. She's the Slayer, which he doesn't know, but they know about the Slayer. They get to a point in this episode where they see each other in action for the first time.
Right.
They are there at the big battle at the end. The episode ends. They all get their voices back, and the two of them are sitting in Buffy's dorm room, sitting across from each other. And so we've got to talk. Yeah, I guess we do.
Silence.
Silence. And so they lose their voices. They can't speak. When they need to speak, they don't speak. Like, there's so many great layers of complexity. This is one of my favorite episodes. You can stand alone, watch this. For someone who has never watched any of Buffy, it still stands as a really great, scary horror movie type Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode.
That subplot of the underground monster hunting, that sucks. I'm just
the
going to say
had great ideas,
it sucks.
and it went wonky. Adam was a good idea done poorly. Joss Whedon disappears from Buffy because Angel starts. So
gotcha.
that whole season, and the whole idea behind it was great. Adam mimicking that Frankenstein type idea, just done really poorly.
Not my favorite of the subplots, but one of my favorite episodes for sure. I marked Hush as number 3. I think there is also things to glean as far as like metaphor and symbolism with Hush as this allegory for censorship or for people, especially girls or women, having a voice and speaking out. I think there's a lot of that in there as well, as far as like, what is the scariest thing that you can think of as a teenage female superhero not having a voice? Well, that's what a lot of us teenage girls feel like, right? Is the audience to that.
Well played. You put for your number 5?
Season 5, episode 16, The Body. This is the episode where Joyce, Buffy's mom, dies. Buffy comes home. She walks past the living room. She does a double take. She looks, and there's Mom, and she died. She wasn't killed by a monster. There wasn't a horrible, big special effects fight. She didn't make the ultimate sacrifice to save the team. She just, like all of us regular people, she got sick and we thought things were getting better, and then she died. And I put this episode in my list of favorite episodes because I hate it. I mean, I hate this episode. The first time I watched it, it was difficult to watch it. This last time I watched it, now that I'm older and more people in my life have passed away, it was even harder to watch. But the reason it's hard to watch is because it's so well done.
It's so real.
It's so real.
Yeah.
It is gut-wrenching, every scene. I don't think there's any music played in the episode at all.
Not at all.
It is just silent, and for much of it, you just, when you're looking through Buffy's perspective, you're alone, and she doesn't know what to do, and you don't really know what to do, and she keeps having to go through all of these difficult moments that everyone has to go through as people die. You have to tell people about it. People are going to ask you how you're feeling. The initial scenes where she calls 911 and they want her to do CPR, and she does chest compressions and snaps the sternum, and it's horrific on not a monster movie level, on a real life level. And I think it's one of the best written, best shot, best acted episodes in the entire series. I hate it, and I will never watch it again in my entire life. But I will think about it.
It's one of the hardest. All the times I watched the series, because I've watched the entire series front to back many, many times. It's one of the ones that I kind of put on mute and just let play. Especially, I agree with you, as we've gotten older and have been in maybe similar type circumstances, it gets harder to watch. It is so real. The surrealism, the whole first part of it, I believe, is a single shot. It's a single shot camera that follows Buffy, and it's so surreal. The reactions of all the characters and the silence is what rings true, because it's awkward, it's hurt, Anya portrays it beautifully. Anya being a new human, she doesn't understand these customs. So she at some point freaks out and says, nobody's talking. Xander punched a hole in the wall. He won't talk to me. Like, just the realness of all of it. I don't know why it's not on my list, except I probably thought, well, we'll talk about it because it's on your list, but it's in my top 10. I can't figure out what my actual top 5 is. I have a list of top 10. It is in my top 10. And it's for all of those reasons. It's just gorgeously written episode. Buffy can't do anything about it. She is powerless and has to deal with that. It just has all the layers of complexities for every character and how exactly you would imagine that character go through this. Willow with the shirt. I can't find this shirt. It's Joyce's favorite. I really want to wear it. Like, it's so real. It's scarily real. And just, it's done so well. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. So it is definitely one of the best episodes. It is definitely an episode that I hope in all of my life I will never sit through again.
Well, you don't have to, best friend. Let's go to your number 4.
My number 4, I chose season 3, episode 8, Lover's Walk. And the reason I chose this episode, and you might know him better than I do, but this is the one where Spike comes back after fleeing town at the end of season 2 with Drusilla. He comes back to Sunnydale because he and Drusilla have separated. She left him for some reason, for some other vampire. He just describes it. He's drunk and miserable and depressed and love lost the whole time. He's just walking around with a big bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand and lamenting the loss of Drusilla, who we know is just the craziest, evilest person in the world. But he is just drunk and sad and singing, and everybody he talks to and tries to relate to, he can't stop talking about his breakup to this girl. We've all been there. We've all known that friend.
A chaos demon. Have you ever seen a chaos demon?
It's like it's his finest work up to that point, if not through the whole thing. He's chewing up the scenery the whole time. There's fist fights and stunts, but he just goes through. It's another good example of an ensemble being written as he goes through and has a scene with every single member of the cast where he is just acting turned up to 11 in that style and that voice and that way of talking that only James Marsters has. It's brilliant. It was fun to watch. Even though he's sad, it's just fun to watch him work. Where if there's one thing I would say about the list that I put together that I watched, because I put together the things, it was like, okay, I want to see all the arcs of the big evil people, and I want to see all the arcs of the apocalypses, because I feel like that's where the plot structure is. Most of the episodes are the heavy ones, right? I skipped over a lot of the fun ones and a lot of the throwaway monster of the week ones. But this one I did watch on this second watch through. As I'm watching it, had to take notes and write it down. Oh my gosh, he's just killing it. This is why he's such a big character going forward, is because he can do episodes like this.
Well, it's the first time we see Spike as vulnerable, right? All of season 2, he's a pretty scary villain. He's getting stuff done and then he gets hurt, and then Drusilla becomes more powerful. And then end of season 2 where he forms allies with Buffy, but he's still pretty much a bad guy at the end of season 2. And he comes back and he's showing this vulnerability. There's the scene with Willow where he's kidnapped her. He tries to bite her and he can't. And so they make a little joke about impotence there. And he puts his head on her shoulder and she's like, there, because here's this dude that would kill her in a heartbeat and suddenly is not able to. I love this episode so much. It is not in my top 10. It is important to the character arc of Spike. In the early years of the interwebs, when we had MySpace and AOL with our signatures at the bottom, I had a quote from this on my MySpace and on my signature. And because he's talking to Angel and Buffy. Angel and Buffy are trying to be friends at this point, and he's looking at the two of them saying, you two are playing this game and you're just ignoring the fact that you're still very much in love with each other. But he says something along the lines of, love is not brains, it's blood. Blood working its way through your body to do its will. And he says something like, I may be love's but at least I'm man enough to deal with it or to face it. Or just this beautiful scene of them in the magic shop where he just confronts Buffy and Angel and that big elephant in the room between the two of them that they are not facing. And he just lays it on them. And it's wonderful writing.
That's another good point, just because you mentioned it, I had thought about it. They always had the library, but then they graduated from high school and it became the magic shop. So the formula could still say the same.
Yep.
Perfect.
Well, the high school is gone. It's been destroyed. Yeah. And Giles needs a job because he gets fired by the council. So there it is. No. I put to you in my box for number 4. Again, mine are in order because I can't decide between these two. I'll just mention briefly the musical episode once more with Feeling because it's good. It's well written. The music is great. But I really love that they turned it into a demon that makes them sing and dance. And that they absolutely use the trope of a musical where the music pushes along storylines that have been undercurrent for the whole year. And it serves it just as a turning point. This is what every character has been dealing with. This is what they think about it. They can't help but sing and dance about it. And then boom, we're going to face it. End of this episode is when Buffy kisses Spike for the first time for real. I am not a fan of the Buffy-Spike relationship at all, but this is that turning point and used in a musical episode. So you don't have to take 3 or 4 episodes to get through it. I think it's just brilliantly done in that.
Oh, that's a good point. Used as a tool in that way. Yeah.
The trope of a trope used smartly so that it's a single episode and done. But really for this box, season 2, the episode is called I Only Have Eyes for You. And I am a big fan. Like I mentioned The Witch before, which is much more supernatural type, maybe X-Files type episode. It's not so blatantly evil. I Only Have Eyes for You deals with kind of a poltergeist of a love story between a student and a teacher, in which they find out in the 50s, the student murders the teacher because she's breaking up with him. It's an inappropriate love relationship. He murders her accidentally, walks into the band room, and then shoots himself in the head. And their ghosts are unresolved and haunting the school. what's so good about this episode is you see this scene played out, the murder-suicide scene, a few times with a few different sets of people, and how the poltergeist is ruling the roost here. And then Buffy goes to face the poltergeist, and they do a bunch of Willow's trying spells for the first time, and they try a bunch of different things. Buffy ends up in there with Angel, who at this time has lost his soul and is trying to kill her, and they get caught up in the poltergeist. And Buffy, who's sitting there going, I don't understand how he could have killed her. I don't understand why he couldn't just let her go. And she's dealing with her own breakup with Angel. Those roles get reversed. She ends up in the male role of the murderer, and Angel ends up in the victim role. And as they're taken by this poltergeist, because Angel's a vampire, she shoots him. He doesn't die. They're able to resolve it. Poltergeist is able to go away, and they make their peace with what happened. Overall, it's just this really great episode that uses this ghost poltergeist haunting idea. Again, it's pretty scary and it's pretty intense because this scene plays itself out with people who are just at the school late and they just get taken over. Tactically, what they did was have the original actors playing the 50s characters act the scene out, and then the other sets of actors studied it to replicate it. So it's done really well. It's a really great episode. It's one of my top 5 for sure.
That sounds actually really good. I might go back and watch that. It was not on the list that I put together for this rewatch that I did. I can see it is on the Spike playlist.
Oh, that's interesting.
Not the Angel playlist.
That's interesting. I'd have to go back and think through that one. But the only thing you need to know, listeners, if you want to watch a single episode, season 2, I Only Have Eyes for You. The only thing you need to know is that Angel has lost his soul and he is an evil, one of the most evil vampires. And he's trying to torture and kill Buffy in the same way he tried with Drusilla. So that's the background, what you need to know. But it's a really good episode.
It might be the only episode in season 2 you need to watch.
I disagree with you there. And we'll go to that right now because your number 3 is Hush, which we talked about. So I'm going to go to what I put on number 3. I actually put a tie here as well. I put Becoming Part 1 and 2, end of season 2. In my opinion, they go all out on what Buffy is, what she stands for, and what she has to face. Between these 2 episodes, she loses everything. She loses her parents, not to death, but to me, it's a coming out episode. She comes out to her mom as the Slayer. And that's a beautiful scene, beautifully acted by Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I think I might have even written down these quotes in my notes, right? That's the one where she says things like, have you tried not being a Slayer?
Yeah.
I should have deleted it. It was so good because I was writing them all down. I'm like, oh, the allegory is thick on this episode.
Yeah. To me, I mean, again, personal reasons to me sounds like coming out. Right. Very emotional coming out episode moment. But mom says, if you walk out this door, don't come back. Right. Principal Snyder says, you're expelled. Can't come back to school. Her friends are all in danger and hurt. And Drusilla kills Kendra. And that's all on Buffy's shoulders. So she's basically feels like she's lost her friends. She doesn't know that Willow's alive. She has to go face Angel, who is at this point the love of her life. Then you have the end result of Willow being able to resurrect his soul, just as the big Akathla hellmouth is opening between the dimensions, and Buffy has to essentially slay Angel to close it. Only Angel's blood closes it. It just, first 2 seasons of Buffy, all comes and accumulates to this moment. Also, some of my favorite episodes are when they go back and do the history of, this is where Angel came from. This is where Drusilla came from. Oh,
I love those.
This is
in the
the
Victorian costumes, and they're like in Ireland, and then they're in China, and it's so
and
good.
Darla, how Darla sires him, and how they're there for the Boxer Rebellion, and just all of those episodes that have that. This is the first that we really see that, and so this is the first time you get to start seeing the depth of these characters and the stories of these characters wrapping up to this big moment for Buffy at the end of that season.
Yeah, those are really fun.
The second part I put on here, New Moon Rising, just a quick, if you did not watch this, Rob, in your rewatch, New Moon Rising is in season 4 when Willow is about to come out herself with her relationship with Tara, and Oz shows back up, creates these moments of questioning for Willow, and the initiative is there. They end up capturing because he's a werewolf. Willow comes out to Buffy. This scene is so well done. It is from Willow's point of view, looking at Buffy sitting on the bed, talking to her. And Sarah Michelle Gellar is the only one acting in this scene. And you see her go through the, what do you mean? Oh, that's what you mean. That's what you mean. It's just so well done. The end of the episode, it's the whole Oz and Willow. I can imagine some time when we're old, walking on corners, I'm going to bump into you, and it's going to be you, and it's going to be Oz. And right now is not that time. And it's just this really well, the 19-year-old in me, or 20-year-old in me was like, oh my God, that's so true. So I have a personal type connection, but it is a good character moment for Willow and Oz.
Allison Hannigan did a great job with all of those moments. And she's so charming, and she's so, the modern term would be adorkable, that you just feel for that character. And it doesn't matter what she says or what she's going through. You're like, yeah, whatever you need, Willow, we're there for you. She's just so good.
She nails Willow.
Yeah.
So good. Go to your number 2.
My number 2 is Prophecy Girl. Prophecy Girl is pure 100% Buffy. The pilot episodes, I think it's a 2-parter, is great. It sets the scene. You know who the character is. You get introduced to the friends, and you're thinking like, all right, I'll stick with this. And you watch a few more episodes, and it's like, all right, it's Monster of the Week, and she does these, she stabs these vampires. That's cool. And then it shows already, I guess, just in those 12 episodes, that there's this overarching plot. There's this evil. There's this thing that she has to defeat, and it's big, and she's got to gather everybody together, right? And everybody's going to play a role. Like, they have assembled the party to go on this grand adventure. And there's just these scenes that I watch now, and I've seen these scenes in other places so many times. When we see Buffy in a prom dress with a freaking crossbow walking down the street in slow motion, with the Scooby Gang behind her, and they're all like weaponed up and stuff going through. It's so iconic. It is like, those scenes are like, this is Buffy the Vampire. Just like when I see that splash page of art in Astonishing X-Men, or when I see the Firefly team doing the exact same cinematography made shots, or in Avengers bringing that cast together. This is important because, one, Joss Whedon writes the way he writes. Somebody might die. They do a very good job of making sure every character has a scene before the big battle or whatever that pours their heart out and grows them as a character. And it's purposefully made because every once in a while, 50% of the time, one of those characters, bloop, we're going to pluck right out of the show, and it's going to break your heart. Nobody dies in this one, but it does go through that. Wait, who dies in this one?
Buffy dies in this one.
Oh, okay. You're right. You don't lose her forever, though.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Nope. You're absolutely right. Looking at it now, it's like, oh, these are those Whedonisms. This is what he does. That shot of Buffy in the prom dress walking in is just beautiful.
Joss Whedon does not ignore that the movie exists, right? If you didn't know the background of it, he writes this movie, sells it finally after all the years he pitches it, he sells it to a movie studio. They make it this campy, she has female cramps when the vampires come by, and it's Luke Perry because 90210 was really popular, and it's really campy, and Joss Whedon hates it. He hates it. And so he pitches the show to be darker, to be more like what he envisioned, but he doesn't ignore that the movie exists. And actually the character Buffy in the series moves from Los Angeles. It's supposed to take place at the end of that movie when she's battled all these vampires and burned the gym down. And that's absolutely brought in.
Which does make sense. You would be expelled.
Pretty much.
And have to go find someplace else.
So one of the first times he pays homage to the movie, that iconic prom dress with the dark coat over it at the end is 100% from the movie. So,
and it does it better.
Yes, it does. 100%. The show is what it is because of that background, but also the moments they pay homage to it. They do the same thing in Becoming 1 and 2, where Angel with a soul who's suffering sees Buffy for the first time. He's taken by the demon dude, and he's all weak, and he's sitting there and he's watching her at a school, and she's wearing the Valley Girl hairstyle, and she's walking out of a school in Los Angeles, and she's sucking on a lollipop going, okay, friends, call me. And this is when the watcher there first approaches her, and Angel's watching all this. So they absolutely honor that. And Prophecy Girl, it also happens in a really big level. We're both on our number 1 boxes. I will talk about mine. No, this is my number 1. This is my favorite episode. Fool for Love is my favorite episode of the entire series, even more than Hush. It is the episode where Buffy is stabbed with her own stake by a vampire. She's weakened terribly. It scares her very badly because she's never been hurt like that before. And Giles brings it up to her to go and talk to Spike about it. Well, Spike has actually, Spike has
Now
killed
I'm
two
remembering what
Slayers.
episode this is. Yes,
why don't
this is
you
a really
go
good one.
and talk about that? And this whole thing, you learn Spike's background. You learn he was this big nerd that couldn't get the girls, and he was bad at poetry, and
bad poet.
just bad. Everything he does is obviously a vengeance to that nerd person he was. Him telling the stories and how they interweave him and his movements to what's happening in the scenes when he kills those two Slayers. It is so visually beautifully done. It is so story-wise beautifully done. And Buffy turns it around on him at the end. You know, I would never be with you. You're beneath me, which is what the Victorian girl says to him when he tries to read her a poem. And it really it sets up so many different payoff levels. The second Slayer he kills ends up being the mother of the
That's what I was going to say.
The last season.
That's where we see the fight where he kills what's-his-head's mom and takes the leather jacket from her in the 70s.
That he recognizes in season 7. Yeah, it has so many payoff levels. I mentioned before how much I love those background stories. This is Spike's background story done to perfection. And in a way where Buffy's showing vulnerability to Spike and then says, nope, I'm not going to be vulnerable to you. And it just, for the next 2 seasons, pays off so much. My favorite episode of the series.
You often talk about how the arc and the storylines travel so far beyond seasons, from season to season to season, and kind of lay breadcrumbs for things. When you find out that Principal What's-His-Head is the son of that second Slayer that Spike kills and stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, who is this guy? And he's all like, you know, he's been doing creepy things, but now you kind of understand, like, oh, he's a vampire slayer. He's a monster hunter. He's worked his whole life. He's got all these tools and he's got all this stuff. Like, is this dude gonna get his redemption arc and kill Spike? Is this what you're gonna do with me in this final season? Is this how Spike goes? And Spike goes over and just beats his because he's just a regular guy.
He's just a dude with vengeance on his mind, but no special powers. He purposefully volunteers to become principal of the Hellmouth High School. Like, there's just so much payoff to that. I remember actually swearing at the television when he starts to bring her up. Holy like, the pieces that you put together. And again, this is a Joss Whedon thing. There are things that he knew was going to be the thing when he wrote them. The whole first season, Buffy talks about being the only one. I'm the only one. This is a job. I hate this. And that takes you all the way through to the end where she's no longer the only one. What are you going to do now?
Yeah, that's so good. Like, I was on the hook. I thought that guy was going to kill Spike. That dude, he'll be like leaning up against the wall, just cool as could be. And Spike's just like, that's a nice coat. Where'd you get it?
Mm-hmm.
New York. And you're like, oh, this dude's going to kill Spike.
Yep.
And then he just fails.
But it's realistic. It's not realistic.
Absolutely. It's in world realism. It's in world realistic. And it builds up this expectation. And then, oh yeah, remember, there's rules in this universe. We're not just going to retcon everything.
Yes, I love it. So speaking of that over big giant arc to the last episode,
that is my number one. Season 7, episode 22, the last episode, Chosen. This is an incredible episode because, again, it's one of those ones where you've watched the entire 7 seasons and you're kind of like, all right, what's Joss Whedon gonna do to me? Who's not gonna make it? You have this thing like, this is it, and sure, they're probably gonna win, but it's not gonna come without a price. And what's that price going to be? There's an overarching fight scene, a cinematic fight scene. It's a 3-act fight scene where they delve deep into the dungeons and they find the army of vampires, and it looks really bad, and they start coming out and they're fighting, and Willow's upstairs and she does the spell with the cool axe thing. I would say the name of this fight is All Potential Slayers Are Now Slayers. And there's the Sarah Michelle Gellar voiceover, and it just shows all these scenes of little girls all around, the world in different situations. And you're seeing that this power is awakening within them. It's a nice, powerful moment. And the huge pack of potential slayers that she's amassed into this army all wake up with their powers and just start kicking ass, and all the vampires are getting dusted. Felicia Day is in there, like with a sword chopping people in half. It's amazing. And then it has a second act where Buffy gets stabbed like through the stomach, and one of the girls, you know, that you've been seeing the last couple episodes gets thrown off a cliff and killed. And it's like, things are going. And Spike gets, you know, pushed to the back and kind of taken out of the picture. And it's like, oh no, act two, everything's, you know, going, it's not looking so good. Is it going to be enough? Buffy uses her bonus action to cast Second Wind and just pops up like nothing happened. And the mystical artifact starts glowing on Spike's chest, and they start cast the daylight spell into the thing and start zapping down vampires. And then they have to escape. It's so good and so fun. It's a good end. It's like, wow, all of this led to a very cinematic and climactic episode.
Agreed on all fronts. My issue with the episode is that I feel like it was a 2-hour episode that crunched into 40 minutes, and that big fight at the end, the potential of that being really amazing. It was a 6-minute afterthought at the end just to get everything done.
I think it's still pretty good.
But, no, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that. For me, as someone who watched every episode of the course of 7 years, I remember when that episode ended, I went, okay,
I don't know. I still love it. I still think it's the best one.
That's it.
We lose Anya, and
poor Anya, and
Anya is my favorite person on the show. In this second watch through, I'm just like, I'm in love with Anya. She is just the perfect person. I love it.
The actress plays her very well, because it's not easy to play someone who doesn't understand human culture, and to do it in a way that's believable and goofy. And it's so many comedic moments with her throughout the show. One of my favorite, I say to people all the time, is slap my hand now. And Giles looks at her and he's staring at her and in jubilation, slap my hand. And he goes, oh, you want a high five? So she's a well-written character for sure. And unfortunate she doesn't make it to the end. But I'm also bothered by Xander's non-reaction to her death. I don't know. There's just some things in there that felt rushed to me. And I really feel like we waited so long that season to get to that point. I really think they could have lessened some of the other stuff to have made it a little bit longer of an episode.
To disagree, there is the moment at the end when Xander is asking about Anya, and Andrew lies to him. She died saving me.
Well, she did.
But
she took the attention of the guys that were after them so he could run away.
I think the implication is, in the moment, he's like, what happened? And just, I don't know. I was scared. I didn't. And Xander is like, how did it happen? He just says, she was great. She died saving me. Like, really, he was curled up in the corner, has no idea. I liked that moment. Like, I felt like, it's tragic. And I like tragic ends.
I put some honorable mentions on here for anyone who doesn't know much about the show or has maybe seen it once or twice. These are some great episodes to watch. Talked about any episode that covers the past. So if that's not on your spreadsheet, I'm happy to go through and just add that. Any like backstory about the characters. Band Candy, amazing episode. I want to say season 3, the band is selling some laced candy that causes all the adults to act like teenagers. It's a little bit of the hocus pocus idea where someone wants to steal a bunch of babies and they can do it because the adults are all acting like teenagers. It's an episode where Giles plays Teenage Ripper, who just doesn't give a care about anything and ends up hooking up with Buffy's mom. And a bunch of us were rooting for that relationship to happen at the time. Like, they should be together. The Witch is the one where Amy is introduced. Amy, who eventually turns into a rat and then not a rat. Amy's introduced with her mom. Her mom has swapped with her, and so that she can relive her youth and become a cheerleader again. It also ties in the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, in that Sarah Michelle Gellar's Buffy character tries out for the cheerleading team and gets involved with that because in the movie she's a cheerleader. Another episode, the Zeppo. This is the Xander-centric episode in which everything is done by his point of view. So there's actually an apocalypse happening in this episode. We have no idea what it is because everything is done from Xander's point of view. There's even a scene where he's trying to run up to Buffy and Angel, who are having this emotional, tearful, you can't go in there alone. I won't let you die. And he's like, hey guys, and nothing's happening. Zeppo is a really, really great episode. And then Earshot. I put Earshot in there because it by itself is an okay episode. But here's the backstory to Earshot. This is the episode where Buffy accidentally gets some drinks, magic potion, or comes in contact with blood or something, allows her to hear everybody's thoughts. So it's a lot of ha-ha funny. That turns into problematic for Buffy because that she can't stop hearing everyone's thoughts. And then she hears what sounds like a threat to the school. Something like, this time tomorrow, you'll all be dead. So she's got to spend all this time, and it's wearing her down hearing all the voices. And she's got to try to figure out who's trying to kill people at the school. This episode was set to air the week that the Columbine shooting happened. So they actually did not air this episode until way after, like a year later, prior to the next season or at the end of the season. I can't remember, like same week that happened. And like the next episode was supposed to be this. And in the episode, she actually finds Jonathan, the character Jonathan, has a sniper rifle in this little tower of the school. And she has to beat him down to wrestle it out of his hands. I won't spoil the episode, but like they're presumably to shoot students from that tower, but ends up being something else. But that happens in the episode. So they decided to not air it. And you had to wait months and months and months and months and months after Columbine before watching that episode. So,
oh, that's real interesting, because I think another powerful moment is when that punk he shoots Tara with a gun.
But that's not Jonathan. Jonathan doesn't shoot Tara. The other dude does.
Jonathan?
Jonathan's the little Weasley dude. He ends up doing the spell. He's in the episode Superstar.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's the other guy who shoots Tara.
The other guy shoots Tara. But
God, that episode is another one that's just like a punch to the gut.
Yes. That episode is so good as well. But Earshot's good. It's a good episode to watch in context of what was happening in 1999. That same season, I think, is the same season where the season finale was also delayed. The episode where the students at graduation have to fight against the mayor who's turned into a giant snake.
With all their pitchforks and baseball bats.
For the same reason, they decided not to air that episode. They waited until the beginning of the next years to play that episode too. So again, to put things in context of the time, sometimes it's pretty powerful. So I put those. Did you have any off the top of your head?
Like also Rans?
Yeah.
Oh, there was another really good episode. You might know which one it is. It is a Tara episode. It's when Tara's family has come and tracked her down to come bring her home because, you know, she's cursed with demonic powers and all this kind of stuff. They're very backward in the way that they act and those kinds of things. And she has lived with this fear of, oh, well, you know, I have this magic powers because my mom was a demon and I'm a half demon. And so there's evil in me. It helps understand the shaping of her character as being a little bit shy and kind of meek. And then I believe it is Spike that brings it all out into the light. And it's like, there's no such thing as that. This is something that you've been doing for generations, telling the women that there's evil in them to keep them under control. Yes. And it's just this realization. There's a lot of moments that, I don't know, they might be a little heavy-handed, but I think it's appropriate for the genre where it really talks about chosen family and it really shows the Scooby Gang taking in this other member and embracing her into the fold and accepting her for who she is, acknowledging her past and her trauma and just making the relationships that much stronger. I remember that one being a really powerful episode in this rewatch.
Yeah, that episode's called Family.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good episode. And it's the first time you get any depth to Tara's character. She's kind of just a love interest that Willow meets, and it's ambiguous whether or not she's a love interest. And then there's question about whether or not she's accepted in the Scooby Gang and whether or not she's part of the team. And this is the moment where they all kind of show her, yes, you're part of our chosen family. Absolutely. That's a good episode. There's a very young, unknown Amy Adams that plays Tara's sister.
Oh, snaps. Is that right? Oh, I was going to bring that up too when we were talking about Anya. Did you see that same actress showed up in WandaVision in
Emma Caulfield
50s episode?
Yes.
All super creepy. Yeah.
And she plays great in that too. It's really great to see Emma Caulfield playing something different than Anya, because I don't think she's had very many major acting roles after Buffy. She's had things here and there, but to see her in WandaVision was great.
Oh, the other thing that I was going to mention was in this speed running through the seasons was the Dawn story arc was way less annoying and just got to the point. What is that? Season 5?
Season 5. Yes. Season 5.
Yeah, season 5. Speed running that, and it just really gets to the point. Every episode I watched had some mention of Dawn being the key and that was the point of it. The first time through 20 years ago or so, watching the entire season, I just remember like, what is up with this sister? This is the most like Happy Days bullcrap I have ever seen. She's super annoying. There's no reason for her to be here. watching just the episodes that had the overarching plot, it was like, oh, poor Dawn. It's not her fault. I really liked it.
That's good to know, because that's it, watching it every time, especially when, almost 30 years ago when that season was in, it's like, what the hell is this? Mm-hmm. Why is this a thing? And what's really interesting, you can actually go back to the end of season 4. Season 4, they battle Adam, the second to last episode. You think it's the last episode of the season.
Oh, right.
Then you get that weird dream sequence episode where Buffy eventually meets the first Slayer. I didn't realize this, but going back and watching it recently, there's actually all these little hints throughout that episode that Dawn is coming. It's really, really interesting. And that means they knew about it. Going into the end of the season, they knew how they were arcing the next season and how they were going to make it. So here's the sideline to this. Buffy almost ended season 5. It definitely was ending on the WB. WB is like, we're done with this. Sarah Michelle Gellar was getting bigger acting roles in movies and stuff. Is she going to continue as Buffy? There was question throughout season 4 going into season 5, is this the last season? I believe they built season 5 to possibly be an end. At the same time, it's not the end we got in season 7. It's not that way overarching first episode to last episode, because I believe Joss Whedon was also pitching the show around to other networks. They get through mid of season 5 and realize they're going to be able to sign on season 6 and 7. The cast agrees. So somewhere in the middle of that, it shifts a little bit. But I think this addition of Dawn was meant to be an end all be all, where Dawn doesn't even exist at the end of it, because they're going to close out the series. And then they got to shift from that. So you can see very early on this idea that Dawn's not a long-term character because she's this annoying little twerp. And then all of a sudden her character shifts. Her character gets complexity. Her character calms down as a teenage girl. And you get to the body, which the actress that plays Dawn does really well. One of the most heartbreaking scenes in that is seeing her reaction from the point of view of her classmates inside the classroom watching out.
Silence.
There just is a shift to Dawn to where, okay, it's not her fault. And that happens throughout season 5. But the beginning, the first parts of season 5 is, what is going on here? This doesn't make any sense.
This time through, it was really focused on that plot, and it did a lot better for me, because I had the same, I remember, like, as soon as Dawn showed up and I got to that part, like, oh yeah, this part, this is dumb. Yep. But then watching, like, oh, well, no, here are these 8 episodes from this season, and it makes it very important, and it all flows really well. Like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, Rob, we actually had one more top 5 list, but here's what I propose, because we've done it again. We have a conversation that is taking a few hours and could easily become multi-part episode. It will not be the only time that we'll talk about. I
warned you, everybody.
Let's take that last top inside jokes and turn it into a one-shot, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But we're going to move on and hold off the rest of this episode to a one-shot. So that leads us to, Rob, what is the nerdiest thing you did this week?
The nerdiest thing I did this week, you were there. We went to a high school marching band show.
Yes.
Had a good old time looking at these show designs and these kids marching around the grass doing their best to make music sound good. If you've never been to one, it's like all day festival kind of the thing. It's similar to a music festival. There's vendors, there's food, there's merch, and you sit up at the stadium and the high school bands come on one by one by one by one, and they are judged. There are music, performance, and dance judges up there in the booth, and they're filling out rubrics and giving scores, and the scores accumulate throughout the marching band season up to championships. So it's fun.
It's been a long time since I've been to a show. It was a really good time and got to see some students from different schools. We haven't recorded an episode in a while because we tend to record way ahead of time. So I have like multiple things, not just this week, but first of all, we killed Strahd.
Yeah, we did.
We
Strahd. Did.
So
we've been talking, a lot of my nerd things had to do with 3D printing the game board for the Castle Ravenloft board game. It finally got done.
Yes, it did. And we played the game, and we actually beat Strahd on both levels. Your son, Andrew, rolled that 13.
Wait. Did we win part 1?
Yes, because we got to part 2.
I think we lost part 1.
We won part 1. That's how we were allowed to go to part 2. Strahd disappears and we had to chase him down into the second part of the cellar. But okay, so caveat to that, because I was new to the game, I made a mistake that would have ended the game. I didn't understand this part of it. If I had understood this part of the tactical part of the game, I would have done this. So technically, we did not win the first part, but you let the technicality slide because my choices would have been different had I understood how to play the game. So then we continued. Strahd disappears. We had killed his assistant. Strahd disappears, and then we met up again like a week later to do the second part. Luckily, we pulled Strahd out very early in the game so that we weren't all beat down, and that was really helpful. And then we get to that battle, and 3 times it looked like Strahd was going to beat us. 3 times. And we actually did it. Andrew rolled the death roll.
That was 13. Really fun. It came down, like we were at that last roll, and it was like, if it gets to the next person's turn, we're going to lose because that person is down. You have, and you calculate it out. Like, you have to roll a 14. If you get a 14 or higher, we can do it.
And he called the numbers. I think it was over 12. I think he had to roll a 12 to hit Strahd or higher, or whatever that was. He's like, what are you going to roll? Andrew's like, I'm going to roll 13. And
he's going to roll 13 because it was his 13th birthday.
Yes.
He's like, well, if I'm 13, I'm going to roll 13. And he did it. You're exactly right.
So that's good. And then a couple weeks ago, I marched with the USC band for that big 50th celebration of Dr. Bartner with 1,200 people on the field. That was great. Went to you with the show. But the nerdiest thing I'm going to say I did this week is I filled out my first backer kit of the first Kickstarter that I launched. I was all super excited and went and filled it out and did all those things. And sometime this spring.
And did you get hooked? Did you get sucked in? How many add-ons did you put in your backer kit?
This one did not have some very many add-ons. It was just dice. And I figure I don't know that I'm going to play this game enough to justify spending another $20 on an extra pack of dice. So I did not add on this one because all the add-ons were brought in during the campaign. What is the nerdiest thing you're going to do next week?
So the nerdiest thing I'm going to do this week when we talk about, this is the last episode before our mid-season break for the holidays. So we're recording and it's for us in this time, it's right before Thanksgiving, and we're going to give ourselves a few weeks to get a buffer going as we enjoy the holidays with friends and family. So people were asking me last week, like, oh, what are you going to do over the break? What are you going to do for your vacation? And the answer is, I am going to lock myself in the game room and I am going to really crack down on painting miniatures because I got to get some of these projects done. To which I am replied with, so the same as every other week.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's it. But we are coming down to the end of the year and I have to get projects done. I am finding that I'm suffering from like hobby ADHD. I keep jumping to different places and I need to focus and get stuff done.
It's really easy to do, especially for you. You have the 3D printer. So the next thing that you want to print comes up and you turn your focus to that. It makes sense.
That's exactly what's happening.
At some point, as we recorded these first handful of episodes, we gained a 17-year-old foreign exchange student from Norway. My partner's 17-year-old daughter moved in with us, and we gained a dog. The dog is great, doesn't have anything to do with the nerdiest thing. However, Scream 5 or 6 is coming out in January. So I am showing the 17-year-olds the first handful. On Halloween night, we watched Scream 1. About a week later, we watched Scream 2. We're going to watch Scream 3 over this week and maybe 4 around Thanksgiving or so, and just try to build up so that we can go see it in the theaters in January. So I'm pretty geekily excited about that. I know you don't like horror movies, but Scream is another one of those that I romantically tied to my time in college. It came out my freshman year of college, and I'm already a horror fan. And so I'm super excited for the series to continue because they've done a really good job with it. So that's the nerdiest thing I'm doing next week is adding on to watching the previous Scream movies so that we can go watch.
How many are there?
There's like
this is
5 or 6.
Oh my God.
I think it's 5 coming out. I'm not 100% sure, but new one's coming out. I saw the trailer and they took the number out. That's why I'm confused. Actually, just calling it Scream again. So they're doing
like
that.
Like the iPad. What are you doing to me?
So I'm excited about that. As Rob mentioned, we are going on winter break and we'll return in January with episode 10, which we will discuss how we nerd out the old idea of New Year's resolutions and what Rob has mentioned about Trello boarding our goals for 2022. So that's going to be episode 10.
Oh, that's perfect because I'm going to have to focus on that coming up on the new year to make my decisions on what's going on there. Try to learn from some of my mistakes this year and in past years to make sure that I get it right this time.
And I'm really big fan of this. Obviously we'll talk about it with the episode, but I'm a big fan of this and would love to see more people get involved with this idea, which we'll discuss in the episode.
If you have something to say about this episode or whatever episode you've just recently listened to, join the conversation by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at NerdBestFriends. Or send us a message by writing to nerdbestfriends@gmail.com. Please make sure to listen, subscribe, like, follow, share the podcast with your friends. Give us that 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on, especially if it's Spotify or Apple. And over the break, be sure to stay subscribed because like we talked about, we're going to introduce our Nerd Best Friend one-shots, short episodes from the Nerdverse. As we get together and just want to talk about nerdy stuff, we're going to try to do our best to record those so that we can put them out in your feed and you won't miss us too bad over the mid-season break.
That, and we have these great conversations that we started to realize we should actually just share these conversations, especially the ones that aren't as structured as our episodes. So lots more to be said, friends and nerds out there. Until then, Rob, this was Buffy. Always great. And I am so thankful that you watched 50 hours of Buffy for me and this episode so that we can talk about it.
I truly am your best friend.
There's no doubt about that. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Terrible. Take 2. Take 3.
Cast.
Take 4.
Take 27. All right, we'll do it again. Ready?
Give me more snark.
I don't have any snark.
That was snark.
Okay. Oh my God. We're going to do it again. It's where I'm having a Ben Affleck moment.
Come on. That made for great podcasting.
Can't even.
Nathan Fillion.
Thank you.